multi-year program focused on those two very segments through productive use of energy, knowledge, product, and awareness-raising campaigns in 3 countries, naming Madagascar, Benin, and Cameroon, and ended up also with a technical guide on solar PV for health core facilities in sub-Saharan Africa. So the study, the objective of the publication was to provide market insights and opportunities for the productive use. And yeah, and the focus on the PV, I can't see. Well, maybe I should focus on that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, but that's too small. That's too small for me to read, actually. Yeah, which that's behind the, the whole thing. It's okay, don't worry, I'll get there. So we all know about the importance of PUE in the DRE sector, and the key lessons that were learned through this study is that 48% increase in energy consumption that's what I've observed while working on this in the 3 main countries. That there's a high usage consumers that drive the demand, and the top 20% of finance equipment users consuming 16% more electricity than others, and that a reliable energy actually boosts consumption. And there were a few awareness-raising campaigns on the PUE equipment taking place in all of the 3 countries, and obviously gathering a lot of participants. Yeah, and the key challenges that were identified as takeaways from this session were that obviously access to finance, we always go back to the financing and cash issue, but this is now also targeting the very purchasing of productive use equipment, something that we'll surely go through into more details within these sessions. I encourage you to go through the takeaways of this very enriching study report that you can ask at ARE's level and ADEM's level. And now just moving forward to our session. So I would like to start, sorry, there's a lot of paper. I would like to start with you actually, Martin. So as the global sector head of energy for SNV, what scalable low-cost electrification model have you found to be most effective in making decentralized or DRE solutions affordable for rural communities?
I hope, and yes, this one does work. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me on the panel and for the excellent introduction. I think when it's about electrification models that work for everybody, including for the ones that are very hard to reach, it's really about meeting all the needs, but also the capacity to pay of the end users, and at the same time, trying to find a business model as a company that actually is commercially viable. And finding that balance, I think we all know in this room, is quite difficult. To get really commercially viable mini-grid operations is not easy. Everything needs to work. From the regulation side with governments, the tariffs, the concessions, but indeed also sufficient demand, not just from the community level, but from businesses and larger anchor loans, the famous ABC model. Everything needs to work for it to work well. But the good news is there's many successful examples where we see different models that have indeed developed well. Just starting with PayGo. Yeah, so if it's about standalone solar at the household level, I think also no surprise here for people in the room. Say starting from 2013-14, we saw those business models really scaling up with pay-as-you-go. Finding a model there that indeed addresses that affordability issue and making solar home systems that are quite expensive in itself affordable for many people, still not for all people. We also know the challenges in the PayGo solar model and the over-indebtedness and the challenge for companies currently to attract equity, to operate at the scale needed to really address all the issues that you have on the consumer financing side, the default rates, which are still high. So there's many challenges around PayGo. Still, millions and millions of people reached in sub-Saharan Africa with PayGo Solar. It's a huge success over the past 10 years with challenges that need to be addressed, and there's all kinds of initiatives happening to address some of those challenges. I also want to mention you know, solar home systems, yes, pay-go, interesting innovation there to increase affordability. Mini grids, many innovations have taken place there, and some companies are indeed now succeeding to scale, like companies like Huspower and others that are achieving scale. But there is, and my microphone is failing, I feel. Goes on and off a bit, but let's try. The concept of mesh grids is probably also not new for many of you, but it's an interesting model where you build on that success of where you build kind of on the success and the scale that you can reach with solar home systems, interconnecting them at some point where it actually becomes a way of gradually moving from solar home systems to a mini grid. It's an interesting concept that we also supported with different companies. And yeah, there's different models that we can go into, but it's an interesting innovation, and I think, and then another one, of course, energy as a service. I think many of the pay-go players have started to look at that option. Several companies are piloting and testing in it, and some are really operating already at scale with energy as a service. And with that, bringing down further the monthly payments. Also not going for the model where the solar home system in the end is owned by the household, with the challenges also in terms of maintenance and repairs, but where the companies actually continue to provide that service longer term as an energy as a service model. So this is just mentioning a few models that we have seen and where some of it has become quite successful, where I think there's potential to scale.
Thank you, very interesting. Can you just briefly summarize the instruments that you're using and how you leverage financing mechanisms together?
Yeah, so one of the instruments we started with early on, results-based financing from 2013-14 through the NDEF program funded by, in this case, DFID, FCDO now. We piloted RBF mechanisms in different markets. One of them was off-grid solar in Tanzania. And it did indeed play a role to allow companies to scale into new markets and to start doing business in parts of the country where they otherwise would not have gone. Typically, you operate, if you're seeking for a viable business model, you know, in dense enough markets. So typically, you find those companies doing business in cities, around cities, to really address that last mile. Something was needed in terms of incentives for the companies to de-risk them, start operations in other parts of the country, and support them in growing that business. That was successful in this case in Tanzania, scaling up those businesses with like 15 companies into the lake zone. And from there we have seen many replication and successes of RBF models in different countries, right? Like it's commonly used instrument now by the World Bank and many others. What we see though, RBF in itself is nice, but it does not address the pre-finance needs companies have. So you need to combine it with indeed equity, with debt, with, you know, leveraging commercial finance by having access to early stage grants or RBF, TA to companies to support their investment readiness, all those different instruments you need, and that's part of the programs that we provide, together with support on the enabling environment side. So working with governments on policies and regulations to allow private sector investment. Also working on the demand side with end-user financing mechanisms and awareness raising and demand activation basically for people to actually buy those products and services. So it requires a systemic approach, not just one piece of financing, but the full mix of what companies need combined with TA is needed as well.
Yeah, no, very good point, and very clear on the importance of blending financing and how we need to combine various instruments to make it happen in the best conditions. I'd like to turn now over to Terry, talking about blended financing, which is pretty much the core vision of cross-boundary. I'd like to hear from you how you've been how you've been involved in pioneering such financial models, and what you see is the role of this blended capital and all of these different tools in achieving low-cost electrification solution successfully.
All right, thanks, Kami. So maybe just before answering your question, I can start with an introduction of cross-boundary access. We're a company that finances and owns mini-grid projects in Africa. As Kami mentioned, we use blended finance. We partner with developers and operators to build and operate these projects. And we aim to provide grid quality power that can power every energy need, from household needs to productive uses of energy. And we also take a bit of a unique approach because we use project finance. Mini-grids are infrastructure, so we believe they need to be financed, regulated, built, operated as infrastructure. So we use a project finance approach to finance mini-grids. And using this approach, we've been able to sign more than $80 million of mini-grid projects in Africa, and currently have providing power to more than 50,000 customers in Nigeria, and are looking to scale across the continent with a goal of reaching 1 million people. So now onto your question, Kami. The role of blended finance. I think it's clear there's still an imbalance in the sector between the risk and return. The returns in energy access in Africa are just not high enough to justify the risks involved. So concessional capital, blended finance helps to offset some of that imbalance. And more practically, that means we're able to charge more affordable tariffs to customers. Without the concessional capital, the tariffs would need to be very high for the returns to make sense. But remember, we're serving rural communities with low incomes, and there's a cap to, how much we can charge them for this power. It needs to make sense in comparison to what they're currently using, which is mostly diesel and petrol. So concessional capital enables us to charge affordable tariffs. And then secondly, and I think even more importantly, is de-risking private investment. Without the concessional capital, we would not be able to get private investors into this sector. The returns they would not be able to achieve the commercial returns that they're looking for. So, we have some concessional capital that enables our commercial investors to achieve the returns that they need. And just to give an example, we've been able to raise funding from a private equity investor. So that's not your typical investor your typical mini-grid investor. But because we have some concessional capital, they're able to put in their capital because they know that they'll be able to achieve the level of returns that they're looking for. Yeah.
Okay, so what would you say is critical to make this happen? Like, is there a perfect a recipe in your mind? I mean, you have experience with some projects on the ground. What have you learned from them? And I mean, obviously, we expect a lot from the private sector. So I'd like to hear what you want from them. If I were to engage with you, for instance, as a private sector, what would you ask from me? How would you want to see me be engaged more in that to make it happen successfully? And maybe the other way around, what do you expect from your own investors? You've mentioned this experience with when private equity investor. You have a crowd in front of you. If you were to, make a wish list, potential partners, investors, what would it be?
Yeah. All right. So just to start with the first one, what we believe are the key success factors. Most important, I think, is just incentive alignment. You have all these different stakeholders involved. You have regulators, you have the developers, you have private investors, you have the communities themselves, all with different needs that need to be balanced. So you need to think about the quality considerations, the cost considerations, the commercial viability of projects, the affordability and reliability of the power that we're providing. So incentive alignment across all of these stakeholders is the most important thing at all levels, right from, when you're setting policies, are you doing it in a way that ensures that the interests of all of these different stakeholders are taken care of? At our level as, a provider of capital, how are we making sure, and as an asset owner, how are we making sure that our incentives between us and the developer are aligned? And so we think about it in the sense that we cannot over-contract. We cannot, we're not on the ground. We don't have a team on the ground, to check that everything is going according to our expectations. We need a way to just ensure that the developer is acting in our best interests. So, and to do that, I can give you an example of what we've done. We've tried to tie some of the developer compensation to the performance of the mini-grids to ensure that our interests are taken care of as well as the developers. And then secondly, by giving the developer an equity-like stake, we also ensure that they are incentivized to act like an owner. And then to your second question, Kami, on I think it was what we need, what we need from our investors. I think the most important thing is, and this has been echoed even in the previous panel and by other developers, the need for patient concessional capital. Infrastructure projects take a long time, take time to build, take time to set up, take time to structure and contract around. And so we need capital that is patient, long-term, low-cost capital. So we need more concessional capital, more structured grant programs that have very simple, clear, transparent requirements that are easy to follow and that are large enough to actually stimulate the private sector investment required. More local currency financing, more equity. So in short, more cash, which is, yeah.
But I love that you mentioned this morning very seriously. No, I appreciate, and that definitely means that all this is echoing amongst the stakeholders. So I'm happy to hear that. And what I take from what you're saying is also very interesting. So this idea of breaking down the silos of investors on one side and developers on the other. We need to get together and align on common interests and common tools and common ways of moving forward. And of course, cash, patient capital, more patience to deliver faster, actually, which is somehow a paradox, but a smart one. I'd like now to thank you very much, Terry. I'd like now to turn to Ulrich from Zimpotech, who is a product supplier, and you're very much involved in this sector. Zimpotech offers a wide range of solar kits from basic DC electrification to larger AC solar home systems. And I'd like to know, how do you determine the most appropriate product? What's your methodology for different rural communities? And what are the key What are the key factors that influence the choice of solar solutions for affordability?
Okay, thank you. I will try to answer that. So basically, what you can see with us is really that we have a very broad portfolio of products. Yeah? So we start in a very affordable area so that we make sure that really everybody can participate in the solar electrification in the off-grid areas, while we also go to bigger sizes to really step up the energy ladder step by step. Yeah? And we can really see that it's really depending on countries, on the electrification stage, on which kind of product is right now needed. So it's not like there is a one-size-fits-all. Yeah? But what we still can see is also that productive use, despite the fact it's still fairly expensive for most rural customers, as long as you subsidize it in an okay way, it's also still very attractive, yeah, to many rural people, because I just had a very simple example now from Rwanda, where like cooling dairy products just triples the income for the shop, yeah? And that was for a refugee settlement. So there is a lot of potential also in the productive use segment, despite the higher cost. And still, I think also here, because we talk about affordability, but affordability must match the actual quality of the product. Yeah, so because if you just try something with productive use, you try the lowest cost approach, then it might fail in a short time. And I think it should be about the right mix of how to basically have it affordable by maybe a subsidy in combination with the right reliability of a product. So that's probably just from a product looking side. very important factor. Also something which I'd like to talk about maybe is the energy as a service, which is now also often discussed for solar home systems. We know that topic since decades. Yeah, it's not a new topic, but now it's coming up again. So it's quite interesting. We did, I think, like one of our first projects 14 years ago was actually as a service project. Yeah, so therefore it's not really new. But what we can really see over the time, so there is leasing, which has the benefit of ownership, which has definitely a significant factor. And what we can really see is that as a service, definitely also interesting. And the benefit also where I see as a service is the bigger system sizes, you know, not the very small ones, maybe the bigger system sizes to enable already to enter on a higher energy ladder by a cross-subsidized approach, which I think is not wrong, right? Because if we look even in Europe, the home on the countryside is essentially subsidized, right? Because to make the grid there is more expensive than bringing it to the person in the city, where it's like millions of people living. So therefore, I think it's an interesting approach too, but we must see that then the system level must be maybe a bit bigger, a bit more, on a technologically more robust level. So that's probably from a product perspective what we see. Still maybe also to add on the comments from you, I also think, because we are a manufacturer, we look on the technology, but we talk with distributors a lot. And the topic right now really is the equity proportion, which is needed for most companies. Yeah? Because it's a simple math, right? I mean, if we give to a company only debt and there is no equity, and they go to a bank and they ask for more debt for financing, they will say no, right? Because there is nothing which matches the debt already. So therefore, I think really to have more equity in that industry, slower capital is what's needed. You know? Also to help making things more affordable, because there was a very good Google paper, I think, end of last year, about the cost of debt, which is priced in the product, yeah, and it's significant. It's really significant. So if we find a way how to lower the interest rates, that will definitely have a big effect.
Okay, very interesting in talking about financing, but talking also about, you know, financing and affordability, how to bring them together, pay-as-you-go systems or a solution. And you've been experiencing that yourself with your solar projects. Can you tell us briefly a little bit about your return on experience and what you see as successes, but also challenges in implementing that?
Yeah. I think it's getting, what I found really surprising is one topic which I was lately in Malawi, and we had there some refrigeration installations, and we were really surprised how quickly people paid back the systems. Yeah? And that was a productive use. It wasn't even subsidized. And therefore, I think really this sometimes surprises me, but it works, and also pay-go plays a role in that. Even if it's maybe a shorter time frame, it's 6 months, 1 year, but still also to build the credibility towards the end customer, because they know productive use setups already, and they sometimes met bad experiences. So therefore, the pay-go also is a trustworthy enabler for the end customer. Yeah? So because we always talk about financing and manufacturing or designing products, but also we need to look out of the glasses of an end user, like how can I really convince somebody that this is worth it, the investment. Yeah? So therefore, that was really something which surprised me lately. With pay-go, I think really it's a key enabler, yeah, because it makes products affordable. I think we often say like solar home systems would be too expensive, but in reality, if you look on the real costs people spend on candles, on small batteries or something, yeah, in fact, there is a very good business case for entry-level solar home systems, and that's, I think, what's also proven right now, that this does work. What I would, again, looking more from the distributor's perspective, what I always hear is like, we should not try to blow up the overheads of distributors, because that's also a big cost factor, in making products more affordable. And sometimes I know there is tenders where it's like, oh, you need to have 100 employees, you need to have 1,000 employees, and things like this is not healthy for a local business, is my perception, where you have a lot of volatility as well. So I know many pay-go companies which run well. I know pay-go companies which do not run well, and I think it's always a mix in the business, right? And that's our experience.
Well, there are risks in business, so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we have to move forward and continue improving those models and solutions.
Maybe also just one more comment to that, because we really always forget that. There was the COVID period, right? There was for 2 or 3 years a big increase in cost and a big delay in manufacturing times. We didn't experience that, but still there was a lot of things which a lot of distributors carry on today, which they still have from 2 or 3 years ago, and we forget that. And that had a big impact on the distributors and also on the local economies, which now need to rebuild. So I think the pay-go model basically had the problem during that time frame, because prices exploded and the currencies also had problems and still have. But if we manage to, well, now the prices went down again. Now it's on the currencies to stabilize again, and I think then pay-go is definitely the way to go for it.
Yeah, thank you for this insightful reminder of the COVID period, which definitely affected, and I believe those people did not forget the customers, the beneficiaries, and also the private companies going through that. Thank you, Rick. I'd like now to turn to Agnes. First, can you tell us briefly a little bit more about the Uganda Energy Credit Capitalization Company? And I'd like for you to tell the audience a little bit more so about how you're working to improve access to affordable energy, and how you leverage financing mechanisms to do so. Does it work? There's a button on the button, yeah. Try it.
Hello, hello.
Yep. Hello, okay. Okay, thank you very much. I will start by talking about Uganda Energy Credit Capitalization Company, the organization I work for. This is a government institution that was operationalized in 2009, and the purpose is to facilitate renewable energy investments in the sector. That is the brief about it. Now, with the funding from the World Bank, the Uganda Energy Credit Capitalization Company became the implementing agent of the Electricity Access Scale-up project. So the project currently implementing the programs, or the program I'm going to talk about, is the Electricity Access Scale-up project. And under it, we have the results-based financing. And this is where we offer subsidies to energy service companies after they've delivered products and services to the customers. So we must verify and confirm this. Now, because these products and services are delivered at subsidies, that means RBF, results-based financing, addresses the affordability and accessibility constraints from the customers' perspectives, or from the households and businesses. As RBF addresses this from the households and businesses, it also enables the energy service companies grow their markets deeper into areas which they wouldn't have served. For example, the remote areas and the underserved areas, like the islands and hard-to-reach areas even in Karamoja. And the reason being that there is an incentive for this. The deeper you go into the rural areas, you get an incentive for making a sale. So RBF has 3 approaches mainly if we are talking about enabling the communities to access these energy systems. And one of them is the off-grid solar system, off-grid solar technologies. And under the RBF, we offer 2 types, the solar lantern, which is at 60% subsidy, and this enables in charging your phone, and providing some light. Then we also have the solar home systems, which has a bigger capacity and can charge a number of phones, can be used for charging a number of phones and providing light for some number of rooms. So its capacity is bigger. The solar lantern is at a subsidy of 60%. And what does this mean? It means that once an energy service company makes a sale of a solar lantern at 60%, the customer pays 40%, making it affordable to the clients. And who pays the energy service company the 60%, the difference? That is where Uganda Energy Credit Capitalization Company under the Electricity Access Scale-up project comes in to pay the difference to the energy service company. So this makes it easier for the households and businesses to access these products at lower costs. And the intention of the off-grid is actually to provide lighting and to mainly the populations, not only remote, but maybe poorer, who are still using kerosene and candles. And if you are living in Uganda, I think you've heard about the stories where candles burn, the children once left there, you know. So it makes a difference once they can access a solar lantern or a solar home system. Then the other approach is the old technology is the clean cooking solution. And the aim of the clean cooking solutions is to enable still communities that are still using rudimentary approaches like firewood and charcoal. And when we talk about firewood and charcoal, we are talking about deforestation. So we know the impact. We know we talk about deforestation, land degradation, soil erosion, flooding. Now it's raining. I think you can see what is taking place. These are really the effects, even biodiversity. So with the clean cooking solutions, the populations are able to use better methods. And under the clean cooking, we have the biomass and the non-biomass. The biomass is still being tested, so we are yet to implement it. But under the non-biomass, we talk about the LPGs, the electric pressure cookers. We talk about using ethanols. And they are also at different subsidy rates because these are products. But still, the customer will pay the rate, the subsidy rate, and the UECCC under the ESP project will pay the difference to make this affordable and accessible. Then the other technology we have is the productive use of energies. This is where we use the off-grid or on-grid for business development or increasing productivity or for commercial gain. So anything used under this for a commercial purpose, for profit, for example, for refrigeration, solar for refrigeration, it could be for water pumps, for freezers, for grain milling, to make a profit, to make a gain for commercial purposes. That means the customers can still are able to make a difference in their lives, or even better by accessing these facilities. So apart from the results-based financing, which enables the households and businesses access products and services at subsidized rates, we also work through the financial institutions by allowing them, we lend to them finances, lines of credit, which they access at reasonable interest rates. I know the question can be how reasonable is reasonable, but yes, reasonable or low interest rates. So what do financial institutions do? They only lend these funds to the end beneficiaries in energy. That means you must be eligible. Or they can lend these funds to the energy service companies I've been talking about so that they can import their products, they can purchase more of their stock and sell to their clients. We have a number of financial institutions on the scheme. Centenary Bank, I see the contact person for Centenary Bank. The person in charge of renewable energy is there, Abdul Chanika. We have Housing Finance Bank on the scheme, Post Bank, I&M Bank, a number of them. And if you want to talk to them and get more insights about this, they are in the UECCC Pavilion out there. Please spare some time. Yeah.
Thank you for this very comprehensive presentation and explanation. I'd like to know just one very quick additional question because of your position with the government. You definitely have insightful remarks, and I'd like to hear what you think about policy frameworks should be doing and how they could better support, the private sector. How can, what would be your recommendation for those policy frameworks to be more effective in Uganda, but that can be maybe also applied or be, serve as ideas for other countries, East Africa, or even broader?
Okay, thank you for that. I think for policy frameworks to be effective in Uganda, we need to have clear and stable regulatory policies for all, so that when investors are coming, they know what they expect to do, what is expected of them. And this makes it easy that they are all on a leveled floor. They are operating from a leveled floor. Then also the public-private partnerships are very important because this comes with a lot of benefits. Talk about expertise from different partners, capital, then risk reduction, a number of these. And even the way the work is done maybe is a little faster with the expertise and capital. This is very important. Then we can also talk about the financial incentives and subsidies, licensing, the tariffs, and everything. This should be the same across all investors so that it doesn't include some and exclude others. This will enable them I think come in and do a better job. Then the infrastructure development could be looked at from different perspectives. We can talk about the road infrastructure. And I think this is also evident. I don't know where all of you are coming from, but if you came from some reasonable distance to here, then you would see the type of roads we have around here. And also ICT. This is another very important area. We need this to be able to share information with different partners or stakeholders, to communicate, and all that is very necessary. So we must have a sound infrastructure in all aspects that aid economic development. We can also talk about capacity building and knowledge sharing. If we talk about energy, who are the stakeholders and who are the key stakeholders? What skills do they need? Are we providing that? Do we make sure that by the time we onboard them, they are equipped with the skills and knowledge? And when we go out for maybe knowledge, learning, when that takes place, do we come back to share that and actually implement it, or we simply talk about it and leave it there? This is also very important. Yes, I think given the time, I can stop there.
But that was quite an extensive list and a very interesting list. I think that it resonates to a lot of us, but thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Jessica, I'd like to turn to you now. So you represent the Global Distributors Collective, the GDC. Can you first tell us a little bit more about what it is? And then talking about this last mile distributor, spoiler alert, can you tell us a little bit more about their role?
Yes, thanks. And it's actually really nice to go last on this panel, and I've heard from our esteemed colleagues here about how they're already working with our distributors. So yeah, just a little bit about the Global Distributors Collective. The collective is now around 225 last mile distributors operating in over 45 countries. What these companies all have in common is that they distribute as a primary, the primary part of their business, so they're focused on distribution of what we call beneficial products. So that's a range of products, but the majority do focus on solar lanterns, solar home systems, and productive use of energy equipment, as well as clean cook stoves, and some in the wash and health sectors. So what we do at the Global Distributors Collective is we support our companies through collective approaches. So we do a lot of knowledge sharing, training and upskilling, and we also try and advocate for them on stages like this. And I think we've probably got some GDC members in the room today. Anyone want to put their hands up? No, good. They're all out having interesting conversations with providers. So just wanted to summarize some of the reasons why I think and we think it's important to focus on last mile distributors as a key player in the market. And we've heard from our panelists, some of them already. I think the first thing to say is 88% of our members are local companies. So they're founded by local entrepreneurs. This, I think, is beneficial for a few reasons. The first one is that they have deep local knowledge of customer preferences in their particular areas. Local entrepreneurs employ local workforce, and they deliver local solutions to local needs. They're often the first, we call them market creators, because they're often the first companies to go to areas where the normal private sector hasn't yet reached. And they are inclusive. So 78% of the customers that our members serve are rural, and over 2/3 of those customers live on $3.20 a day. So if we're looking for an inclusive, equitable market, then I think distributors have a key role to play in this. They're also really efficient. So we did some research a couple of years back that showed that on average, for every, on average, their capital to revenue earned ratio was 3.9 versus 1.5 for international companies, which means they're much more efficient at deploying capital. They've got lower overheads. So that's, I think, some of the reasons why we should be looking at these as a key player in the market. So to touch on what we've seen and where our distributors are at. So we did a survey last year, and we found that actually equity is pretty much dried up. Not many of our members have managed to get access to equity. We've seen debt, again, also retracting. So last 2023, 53 of our companies managed to access debt finance, compared to 112 in 2022. And that's with half of our members saying that they would like to have more debt in the coming year. Obviously, access to finance remains their key challenge, so we're really keen to support them in this. Just a couple of points on the RBF. We've heard a bit already about RBFs on this panel, and it is an important source for our members. So 14 of our members who received RBF, it made up 40% of their revenues. Crowdfunding continues to be kind of a source of finance for members, but it's not proving to be as accessible as we had hoped. So a lot of the crowdfunding platforms such as Trine are moving towards more C&I kind of companies and less so on the distribution. I think we've already heard about some of the challenges, particularly the macroeconomic. Our members are extremely resilient. We've seen that through COVID, and now with all the macroeconomic devaluation, currency, and inflation, they are still proving incredibly, incredibly resilient. Like, I talk to our members and I have no idea how they're still operating under such conditions. Some of the challenges, they're relying on short-term grants, and there aren't enough grants to go around. I was part of a group last week where we were talking about with other grant providers, and you know, these grant applications, they get over like 500 applicants and then they can select 30. So what happens to the other 450 companies? How do they get supported? And that's why we believe collective approaches are so important as well. I think currency exchange risk, companies are having to borrow often in US dollars, and that really erodes when the devaluation hits. Again, limited access to equity we've mentioned, and then the high transaction and due diligence and admin costs associated with the smaller ticket sizes are really affecting companies. Do you want me to go on to how we think we should be supported?
This is fascinating, but you're making a lot of very good points. I mean, is there any, if you'd like to, if you were to shortlist and recommend very key instruments at the moment, because the list can be very long about what the private sector needs, and especially those very locally established distributors. I don't know, maybe a top 3 instruments that you would recommend.
Okay.
Tough question, I know. Just pick.
So our members need smaller local currency ticket size loans, and that's something we're hopefully working on with them in the coming year. But I think there needs to be an acknowledgement, and I think there clearly is, that not everyone will be reached on a commercial basis. So blended capital is key. I think results-based financing is really helpful for our members. I think ideally there would be carve-outs for smaller companies, and possibly a look at the co-funding requirements, because sometimes the co-funding requirements of RBF pushes our members into taking on types of debt that probably longer term is not great for them. I think there needs to be long-term concessional finance from governments, and I think there should be lessons learned from other governments where they've done this well. I'm thinking of Bangladesh program that actually led to a net gain of about 1.5 billion for the Treasury, despite the subsidies. I mean, we subsidize utilities. Why can't we subsidize solar home systems? Yeah, and then maybe a last one.
That's more than 3.
Okay, I'll stop there then. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jessica. We're getting to the end of our session, but I'd like to ask our panelists for just a final word. So you've made your wish list and just the top 3. I know that you want more, but let's keep it to the essential, maybe, and to the very most critical instruments or support that we need at the moment. And I'd like to make a round, starting with you, Martin. You don't need to go to 3. Let's keep it very brief. That's just dropping a one word like cash is much more efficient than the long statements. So yeah, maybe just your recommendation, key recommendation to finish.
So I work with SNV, and we have been supporting market development programs in energy access for several years. And let's be honest, some of it was successful, but we have failed also many times, right? And that's what we typically see in the sector. And I think we need to do more reflection on that. I mean, we can say we need more cash or we need more equity, but let's be honest, why is the equity not coming? That's because the equity investors see too big of a risk. They have seen actually a sector that also has been struggling. So we need to go to some of the root causes, I think. And let's be honest about that. And I think with that, it's also your call a bit, like we need to do way more kind of coordinated reflection between different stakeholders. The gap is still huge, but we have a huge opportunity as well still in the coming 5 years towards 2030 to make things happen. We see things being scaled up. One call I would like to make is let's not reinvent the wheel. There's lots of expertise in this room and outside of this room on the investment side, on the private sector side, from the big internationals to the local distributors. There is development organizations, governments stepping up with critical programs that are delivering well. Let's learn from the different lessons, because I still see a lot of repeating discussions, say kind of things that we have been discussing this for a while. We by now know what works. Just an example, Mozambique, Brillo program over the past 5 years has delivered energy access for more than 3 million people. Just 5 years, 3 million people working with 20 companies, with investors, leveraging commercial finance, working with the government on regulations for mini-grids to allow further private investment. We just need to replicate successful models. Let's avoid reinventing wheels.
Okay, very clear message. Terry, a quick one wish.
Yeah. I think what would be most helpful would be having large, well-structured RBF programs, as I said, with very clear, simple requirements. We haven't seen much of that outside of Nigeria, and that's the reason, partly the reason why we have done so much in Nigeria and not in the rest of Africa. So having those well-structured programs that are reliable, that allow for deployment of projects at scale, I feel would really boost investment in the renewable energy sectors in other parts of the continent and of the world as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Agnes? One quick comment.
I call upon everyone here who is still using firewood and charcoal to stop so that we can, you can use the other newer technologies we've talked about so that we can save the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing the cooking on the table. Yeah.
I want to go to don't reinvent the wheel, because that's really what I see in our industry all the time. And I'm the second generation, so my father's developing off-grid charge controllers since 40 years, and all the time when I come to him and say like, oh look, there is something new, he's basically saying like, yeah, that's what we did 40 years ago already, or 30 years ago. It's about putting stuff to scale, thinking about how to make multi-year projects out of that. Because right now it's always like one-off topics. It's like, okay, now there's one project, but distributors need like ongoing projects, long-term perspectives, also for investors to step in.
Okay, thank you. So obviously not reinventing the wheel, addressing the root cause and trying to improve what already exists and try to move much faster, I guess. Thank you, everyone, dear panelists, for these very insightful remarks and comments and recommendations. I can actually hear, I know there are some questions, but I do invite you to talk to the panelists after the end of the session. We have to wrap up because we are way beyond schedule, and I can hear bellies growling from up here. Everyone wants to eat. So I'm going to thank all of the panelists. You can please make a round of applause for all of them. Feel free to get in contact with them and to pursue this conversation outside of this stage. And just a small piece of information, if you're actually really hungry and looking for food, you go in the direction of the badge collection desk, turn left on the corridor, and